Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? In this series, I'm going to draw each zodiac sign and tell you their backstory. First, we have the story of Gemini, which focuses on immortality and the strong bond between siblings. So we all know that the sign of Gemini is made up of two twins, but these two twins actually have a name and a pretty interesting backstory. Their names were Castor and Pollux, who both had the same mortal mother named Leda, but they had different fathers, making one of them immortal and the other one not. Castor's father was the king of Sparta, and Pollux's father was Zeus, making Pollux immortal. Castor and Pollux had a really strong bond together, but Castor was unfortunately injured and passed away in battle. Pollux was inconsolable after Castor's passing and didn't want to ever be without his brother, so he decided to go to Zeus for help. Zeus decided that rather than taking away Pollux's immortality, he would just make Castor immortal too, and allow them both to be transformed into the constellation of Gemini so they can live together forever. This story, out of all of the other zodiac sign stories, does have kind of a happy ending. Which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? This story is probably one of the most interesting zodiac sign stories. This is the origin story of Cancer. So we all know Poseidon is the god of the sea, but he was actually forced into hiding after he was attacked by the vicious monster Typhon. So we left a giant crab named Krios in charge of protecting the sea nymphs that lived in his underwater kingdom. But after a while, the sea nymphs grew impatient and they wandered off into the open sea. So Krios asked a giant squid Vamari for help. However, things didn't go as planned. Krios didn't know that Vamari was a vampire squid who swam out, found the sea nymphs that wandered off, and ate them. After Krios did find out, there was a huge battle between him and Vamari. And even though Krios won, he sustained severe injuries. Krios wanted to be laid to rest, but he couldn't because he was an immortal crab. So when Poseidon returned, he honored Krios' bravery and relieved his pain by placing him in the sky as the constellation of Cancer. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite zodiac sign stories. This is the origin story of Scorpio. Once there was a great hunter named Orion who wanted to completely rid the world of all animals. He grew very arrogant and thought that there was no animal that could defeat him. So Mother Earth, or Gaia, sent Scorpio to unalive Orion and protect the animals. Scorpio attacked Orion during their battle and stung him with his large stinger, winning the fight. Because of this, Scorpio was able to save the animals, which led to Zeus wanting to honor Scorpio's bravery by raising it up to the heavens. However, Artemis, who really admired Orion, requested that even though Orion lost the fight, that he should be honored in the same way. Zeus agreed and placed Orion and Scorpio on opposite sides of the sky. And that's why even today, Scorpio can be seen chasing Orion across the sky. So the origin story of Scorpio is really to teach us to never be too arrogant and always try to protect others in need. Quite a nice takeaway from the story. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? Today we're going to talk about the story behind Libra, which is one of the wildest stories I've read. Once there was a man named Tiresias who found two serpents tangled together, and when the serpents attack him, he unalives the female serpent. As a result, this turned him into a woman. So Tiresias lived as a woman until 7 years later when Tiresias found two serpents again, and this time unalives the male. This turns him back into a man, but things aren't so simple. Meanwhile, Zeus is arguing with his wife Hera about who experiences more pleasure, men or women, and they get Tiresias to tell them. Tiresias tries to be diplomatic, but eventually says that in his opinion, women experience more pleasure. This pisses Zeus off, so he blinds Tiresias. But the thing is, this actually gives Tiresias inner sight, and that makes him a blind prophet. Some might think that this myth represents the scales in Libra as opposites, but it's really about cooperation. This myth isn't really about who's better or worse. In a more literal way, it shows that we all have masculinity and femininity within us. You get to choose what feels comfortable to you, and you get to choose your own balance. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? Here's one of the weirdest zodiac sign stories out there. This is the origin story of Capricorn. The story begins when Mother Earth had some serious beef with the gods, enough that she sent a fire-breathing monster named Typhon to fight them. And this is where the forest god Pan comes in. He had legs and horns of a goat. He told Zeus and the other gods to disguise themselves as animals in order to avoid Typhon. And while the other gods were disguised, Typhon approached Pan and was about to attack. So Pan panicked and jumped into the river Nile. Because of this, the lower half of his body, which was underwater, transformed into a fish, while the upper half stayed a goat. So that's why we have this sea goat creature to represent Capricorn, but that's not all. Zeus ended up battling Typhon and had the muscles in his hands pulled out. Pan healed him, which allowed Zeus to defeat Typhon in the end. Because of this, Zeus immortalized the image of Pan in the sky as the constellation of Capricorn. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? You might not have known that the story behind Virgo actually relates to a goddess. Her name was Estrella, the goddess of purity and innocence, and her story begins when Prometheus stole fire from the gods. Afterwards, Zeus decided to punish mankind by sending Pandora's box. But the story of Pandora's box actually leads to how Virgo came to be. Pandora was unable to resist her own curiosity and opened Pandora's box, which contained evilness, crime, hatred, and other abominations. At the bottom of the box was hope, which didn't escape. But that's not all. Opening Pandora's box also caused a mass exit of immortals and gods. Here's where Virgo comes in. So the goddess Estrella was the last to leave, and as she left Earth, she watched the sky every night in hopes of one day returning. She had faith that mankind would be able to defeat all the evils of Pandora's box. The myth says that Estrella fled the wickedness unleashed onto Earth, and she ascended into heaven to become the constellation of Virgo, constantly wishing and waiting for the day that she would be able to return to Earth. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? This is probably my most requested zodiac sign. Here's the origin story of Taurus. So we all know Persephone was the goddess of spring who had to spend half her time with Hades in the underworld and the other half on Earth. But what you probably didn't know is that there's actually more to this story. And it involves a wild bull that was completely out of control. This bull was called Ceres and people were terrified of him. He destroyed everything in the village. No local farmers owned him and no one knew where he came from. But one day Persephone appeared after her half of the year in the underworld was finished. That's when she found Ceres stomping on some flowers near the village. She went up to him and they quickly formed a bond together. Persephone was able to calm him, teaching him patience and kindness. Since then, every year Persephone would return, and as they walked together, spring flowers would appear behind their footsteps. And in the fall, when it was time for Persephone to return to the underworld to Hades, Ceres would also return to the sky as a constellation of Taurus. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? Today we're going to talk about the origin story of Leo, which begins when Hera decided to be a little bit toxic to her husband Zeus by sending a powerful mystical lion to live in a cave in Nemea, which is where Zeus's shrine was. So anyone who wanted to worship Zeus would have to get through this ferocious lion. After that, Hercules was actually tasked to defeat the lion and take its pelt to King Eurystheus. But of course this was no regular lion, because it was the son of the fire-breathing monster Typhon, and it was more than twice the size of a normal lion, and most importantly, its skin was indestructible. So Hercules goes into the cave and blocks off an entrance, but he soon realized something was wrong. He couldn't actually take the pelt off because the lion's skin was indestructible, so any tools that he brought was useless. So he had to use the lion's own paw. Eventually he succeeds, brings the pelt back to the king, but then decides it would be better to keep it as his own armor. Afterwards, either Zeus or Hera immortalized the ferocious lion in the sky as the constellation of Leo. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? This story is pretty wild. This is the origin story of Aquarius. The story begins when Zeus became interested in a young man named Ganymede. So he turned into an eagle, took Ganymede to Mount Olympus and made him his new cupbearer. This meant his job was to basically pour the gods' divine drinks. And here's where the drama begins. When Ganymede became the cupbearer to the gods, he replaced Zeus's daughter Hebe. Hera, who was Zeus's wife and Hebe's mother, was not happy about this. She wanted her daughter to have the job, and she was jealous of how much attention Zeus was giving a mere human. Now it's uncertain whether Zeus was actually in love with Ganymede, but some variations of the myth include that as well, and say that that's the real reason why Hera was jealous. But pretty soon Ganymede realized that he didn't like his job. He noticed that people on Earth really needed water but wasn't getting any. In an attempt to help humanity, he poured the gods' drinks onto Earth, causing rain for days and flooded the world. When Zeus found out, he was angry, but then realized Ganymede just really wanted to help people, so he placed him in the stars as the constellation of Aquarius. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series. Do you know the story behind your zodiac sign? Today we're going to talk about the story behind Sagittarius, which actually begins when Hercules accidentally killed his friend. So Hercules had a friend centaur named Chiron. In case you didn't know, centaurs are half human, half horse creatures. And one day when Hercules and Chiron were out hunting, Hercules accidentally hit Chiron with a poisonous arrow. But Chiron was the son of the Titan god Cronus, which meant he was an immortal being and couldn't die, even though the arrow was putting him in a lot of pain. Hercules felt really guilty for his mistake and tried to help Chiron by making a deal with Zeus. Chiron would give up his immortality to free Prometheus, the god of fire who Zeus punished for stealing fire from the gods. Prometheus's punishment was that he would be tied to a rock and an eagle would eat his liver over and over again. This way, Chiron would be allowed to die and Prometheus was set free. Afterwards, Chiron's soul was placed among the stars as the constellation of Sagittarius. But which zodiac sign should I talk about next? Follow to see the rest of the series.